So thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm joined by Jen Benson, President of the Alliance for Business Leadership, and Amy Boyd, Director of Policy for the Acadia Center, which is a center which analyzes the energy prices and the environmental impacts for New England of our dependence upon fossil fuels and the impact which it has upon our climate. So we are here today in order to make a very simple declaration. It's to call on our electricity grid operators to say that we cannot simply accept the promise of a future with clean energy. We need a plan for clean energy today. But instead of giving us the green light for our clean energy revolution, ISO New England is proposing to send us on a detour by proposing to delay the elimination of a rule that puts fossil fuel generation ahead of cleaner, cheaper alternatives. ISO New England is risking reliability and cost savings for residents across Massachusetts. And it starts right here in Holyoke. This is where the decision is made to increase our dependence upon oil and natural gas all across Massachusetts. Behind those closed gates, the decisions are made to increase our dependence on oil and gas all across Massachusetts and all across New England. So, the rule that they have promulgated behind those closed gates is called the Minimum Offer Price Rule, or MOPR. But MOPR actually stands for something else. It stands for minimizing our potential for renewables in Massachusetts and all across New England. We should be the leaders, not the laggards. That's what happens behind these gates. These decisions are made in secret, and the secret decisions always come out the same. They come out in favor of the oil and gas industry. They come out against the consumer. They come out against the environment. That's what happens here in Holyoke behind those gates in their secret deliberations. Promulgating sets an artificially high price that prevents lower cost providers of renewable energy and battery storage technologies from outcompeting the more expensive fossil fuel powered generators by keeping dirty energy on and clean energy off of the grid of Massachusetts. This is where the conspiracy takes place. Simply put, that is not the kind of rule that we need on the books in the Bay State. We're not just the Bay State, we're the brain state. We have to be ahead of the curve. We have to be leading on these issues. Not a laggard, but the leader. Clean energy is cheaper. Clean energy is reliable. And the need for ambitious and aggressive climate action has never been more urgent. Massachusetts has set a target of cutting its climate warming emissions by 50% economy-wide by 2030. While we have made some progress, United States emissions rose in 2021. The International Panel on Climate Change tells us that we need to peak global emissions by no later than 2025 and then cut our emissions rapidly in order to have even a 50% chance of keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Current policies put our warming trends closer to 3 degrees Celsius. In Fahrenheit, that's the difference between a 95-degree day and a 101-degree day. That's what we're fighting for right now. We are in a science experiment being conducted by the oil and gas industry of the United States. And here in New England, we don't produce oil or natural gas, but we have God's natural sun and the wind off of our oceans and off of our open spaces that we can use to substitute. But ISO New England says no. They say we have to go slow. We have to be dependent for too long on that old-fashioned, dinosaur-based fossil fuel that we have been dependent upon for generations. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is this. You have to think about manageable oceans or 11 feet of sea level rise by the end of this century. We need to cut emissions, get clean energy off the grid, and get on track for a safe future today. In addition to the need for aggressive clean energy deployment to address the climate crisis, the ISO's decision to prioritize oil and gas generation in our electricity markets will burn Massachusetts consumers. The price for natural gas increased by more than 60% from January of 2021 to January of 2022. A 60% increase. And the markets are telling us that we are going to see another 60% increase between 2022 and 2023. And that comes right out of the pockets of consumers, of businesses, all across Massachusetts and all across New England. And that's due to, obviously, a need for the natural gas industry to start to export American natural gas to respond to Putin. But the more natural gas that we export from our own country to help Europeans is the higher the price for natural gas will be for consumers here in New England. So we just have to end this cycle. We just can't have a 60% increase in the price to consumers year after year. If we have a smarter way of capturing God's great gifts for Massachusetts and New England with the sun and the wind every day of the year. Meanwhile, the cost for solar has decreased by more than 60% over the last decade. And the cost for energy battery storage has decreased by more than 70% over the last 5 years. Even today, right now, when directly comparing our electric grid resources that keep the lights on when we need it the most, the energy from a 4-hour battery is cheaper than the equivalent energy from a conventional gas peaking plant, which of course is what ISO New England would support. That's crazy. That's backward looking. That's a rear view mirror view of our energy needs in New England for the future. And as natural gas prices continue to go up from Putin's price hike, energy storage, solar, and wind energy are only going to save more money for Massachusetts consumers. So let's get one thing straight. ISO New England's decision to prop up fossil fuels isn't about reliability for Massachusetts consumers. It's about relying on the same old oil and gas solutions that have gotten us into a consumer and a climate crisis. But the fight for clean energy isn't just a fight for cheaper energy. This is a fight for economic and environmental justice across all communities in Massachusetts that suffer from the pollution and public health burdens created by dirty oil and gas plants. It should come as no surprise that 3 New England natural gas plant operators were behind the late-breaking proposal to keep the minimum offer price rule for another 2 years, according to reports. And it happened right behind that secret locked gate, right behind us. We need transparency and fairness for consumers in Massachusetts, not backroom deals and backwards solutions. The time right now calls for action. And today I'm writing, along with Senator Warren and Senator Sanders, to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, urging them to reject ISO New England's proposal and instead support the immediate rejection of the rule that keeps low-cost renewables and storage solutions out while locking expensive oil and gas in. In my letter, I urge FERC to use its existing regulatory authority to ensure that New England customers pay fair and reasonable rates for their energy costs, and make sure that renewable electricity can compete on an even playing field. Renewables are cheaper, cleaner, and a path to a healthier and more affordable future for the people of Massachusetts. We have to build a system that brings advanced, clean technologies into the Bay State. We are the brain state. We should not be driving these technologies away. We should be embracing the technologies of wind and solar. We should embrace their potential. We should embrace what they're doing right now. In 2021, 20% of all electricity in Massachusetts was solar. Let me say that again. In 2021 in Massachusetts, 20% of all electricity came from solar. That's our future. Off of our coastline, we are about to have the leading offshore wind facilities constructed in the whole of the United States. We should be embracing that and having it reflected in the rules that ISO New England constructs. That is a vision for the future, not a vision of the past, which ISO New England stands for. In fact, it shouldn't even be called ISO New England, Independent Service Operator for New England. It should be called Dependent Service Operator on the oil and gas industry, because that's what ISO New England is. Dependent Service Organization on gas and oil. They have been in the past, they are today, and their rules say they want to be for the future as well. It's time for business as usual to end. It's time for ISO New England to get out of the way, because they're not doing their job. They're not reflecting the risks that we have here in New England. We are at the center of the climate crisis. We have natural resources that we can gather ourselves. We need to ensure that we have a future that captures who we are in Massachusetts. The Industrial Revolution began here in Holyoke, Massachusetts. This was one of the wealthiest cities in the United States because they captured that moment in our industrial era. Well, we're at another era right now that is dawning, and Massachusetts has a right to say that we are going to be the leader. ISO New England wants to take us back to the past. It's time to end it, and we have with us great leaders who are going to speak to how important it is to make this dramatic change. I give you first Jen Benson, the president of the Alliance for Business Leadership in Massachusetts. Welcome, Jen.
Good afternoon. First, I have to thank Senator Markey for his incredible leadership, not only on this particular issue, but on all things related to climate. You have represented Massachusetts so well, and we are grateful for your support of these important issues. So ABL represents over 100 leading businesses, and as a business organization, we do care about the bottom line. And so this issue is about the bottom line for businesses and families in Massachusetts. But we also care about economic opportunity and job growth here in the Bay State. And with this decision, ISO New England is not supporting that mission. We see this as something that can hold us back from innovation, something that Massachusetts has prioritized through many initiatives, not just offshore wind and solar energy, but in life sciences and other areas, and has proven to be a winner for the Bay State. I spent 11 years in the Massachusetts legislature, where we put innovation first and foremost in many of the initiatives we took forward, including climate. And Massachusetts has put forth bold goals that mean job creation, which labor leaders, business organizations, and our education institutions have stepped forward to fill the need to create those jobs. And yet, this chilling effect that ISO New England will have with this decision is putting all of that at risk. Putting at risk our own goals that the legislature and administration has supported and put forward. We can't let that stand. We can't let this arbitrary and artificial decision stand in the way of Massachusetts moving forward. And you heard the senator. He's over here now. You've heard the senator. This is not only good for climate, which we all take responsibility for, but it's good for our economy. When you lower the cost of energy, you're actually putting more dollars back into our economy. And so families have more dollars to put into the economy, and so do businesses. And so my membership really prioritizes not only this issue, but innovation in new technologies. We are nearly 25 years, a quarter of the way into this new century. Why we are still prioritizing antiquated technologies of the past is unbelievable. In a state that has been so incredibly grasping opportunity for the next best thing in science, in education, we've been at the top in so many areas. It saddens me to think that we're dropping behind in the race to grasp onto this new technology. So thank you all for coming, and thank you again, Senator, for your work.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. And now we're going to hear from Amy Boyd, Director of Policy for the Acadia Center. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Senator, for having me here today. I am Amy Boyd, Director of Policy for Acadia Center, a clean energy advocacy organization that's working to advance the clean energy future. I'm so happy to be here on this beautiful spring day, the clean energy champion, to look forward to a bright, clean energy future. But I'm also deeply concerned that our clean energy future is being delayed by discriminatory regional market rules that block clean energy. We're here today to talk about the minimum offer price rule. This is an ISO New England rule that serves as a barrier to clean energy entering the regional capacity auction. The rule sets an artificial price floor for clean energy resources and tells them that they can't bid into the market below that level. As the Senator pointed out, sun and wind are for free. Those resources come from God. But unfortunately, even though solar and wind operators can sometimes bid into the market at very low prices or even negative, they can't bid into the capacity auction because of the minimum offer price rule. That means they can't compete. The effect of this has been to slow the development of new clean energy, and it drives up prices for consumers across New England. The minimum offer price rule has erected barriers to clean energy and energy storage in New England for far too long already. But in a filing at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, ISO New England has proposed to delay eliminating this harmful rule. We express opposition to that delay. The calls for eliminating this rule began over a decade ago. Since then, state clean energy policy in Massachusetts has evolved and gotten increasingly ambitious. But ISO New England's approach to clean energy hasn't kept pace. Here we stand, a decade later, and ISO New England claims it's still not ready to eliminate this harmful rule. It wants to delay even longer before clean energy can get fair treatment and consumers can see the cost benefits and savings from having real competition. Our region stands poised to welcome nearly 5,000 megawatts of offshore wind, but that can be harmed if ISO New England's federal regulator approves the delay that they have proposed. A similar amount of battery storage could be harmed. With those kind of modern resources, we could make our electric system both cleaner and more reliable. Instead of hearing constant alarm bells from ISO New England about the risk of winter blackouts like we did this year, and facing price spikes from fossil fuel volatility like we did this year, we could operate on offshore wind and battery storage, serving the electric grid all winter long. The climate scientists at the IPCC have told us that we cannot afford to wait any longer to remove obstacles to progress, like this one. Rules like the minimum offer price rule hurt clean energy, and they hurt our communities. It's time for ISO New England to start holding itself responsible to those communities. The first step to doing so is to eliminate the minimum offer price rule that has stood in the way of clean energy development and protected fossil fuel resources from competition. Our energy system is not an old boys club. It shouldn't be run like one. We need a modern approach to regional energy management that at a bare minimum gives new clean energy the same access to the capacity market that fossil fuels receive. There's no time to waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Questions you may have? Okay, good. I'm working right now to roll out the red carpet so that we can have every family member united here in the United States. The Kapuskis deserve the justice for their families, which the United States can provide to them, even as Putin is denying it to them. So I think it's very important for all of the family members to be able to come here to Massachusetts, and I'm going to continue to work until that job is done and that family gets the help which they need. We don't want an armed conflict between the United States and Russia. But we also want to make sure that the Ukrainians can protect themselves and that they get the help which they need from the United States and other European allies in order to fight this inhumane genocide which is being perpetrated upon Ukraine. So while we don't want our own troops in direct conflict with the Russian soldiers, at the same time we want to give the Ukraine people what they need in order to rebuff this incredible assault upon democracy in Europe at this time. No, I have not done that yet. Any questions for Amy or Jen? Thank you for coming.